MS has been a health condition that I have had special interest in going back to when I was in PTA school. I have a friend that has lived with the disease for well over 20 years, and I have had a friend that has died from a progressive form of MS after about 6 years of being diagnosed. And I have a friend who you have already met, Ann Griffith, who has MS. And I've really enjoyed working with people with MS because there's such a spectrum. I think that's a really good way of looking at it. There's different types of MS, from more common relapsing remitting MS that affects most people with MS, and there is the progressive form of MS, which is actually quite rare. So what I find exciting about this discussion on MS in 2019 is that the treatments for MS have been very effective for many people in terms of getting their life back and in terms of living well with the disease and getting better with the disease. And when I say getting better, that doesn't mean that there's drugs today, treatments that have eliminated MS from people's lives, but is getting well again is probably the better way of saying it, that people, when they are in a relapse, that our role is to help them get better or to be well again. And that's important. So the characteristics are discussed here. I think these are terms that you're familiar with. We have a high, spectrum with MS. I think one classic MS that is consistent is fatigue with the disease or as a health condition. And the other characteristic is flexibility in work schedule. I think for many with MS that has been really a good thing, that a person can work in a salaried position with MS, but that flexibility of scheduling, meaning that being able to choose or have some flexibility as to when work can happen for them. In other words, you do see many individuals with MS even today transition to working part-time versus working full-time, or for many, working from home can be quite good. But my point is that people with MS are working and are successful and are living full quality of lives, and with really no shortening of their lifespan with MS. Now, that doesn't mean that people don't die from MS. They do for complications of MS, and prematurely, as in the case of my friend, or as recently as somebody that was in care at a skilled nursing facility, a younger man, probably in his 50s, who had a heart attack, and that was complicated. I think this heart attack happened in part because he wasn't as active as he could have been without the disease, and he had some decline in health as that MS disease progressed. However, working with him the day before he had his heart attack, there's no way that it was predictable when that heart attack was going to happen. It happened during his sleep, and he passed away. But I do think heart disease and respiratory complications continue to be primarily the cause of death. For people in general, heart disease is the number one killer or cause of death for people. But when you aren't as active, when you have had some other structural changes to your body, such as more accumulation of body fat because of not being active, or complications related to spasticity that prevent you from being active, that can certainly affect your quality of life. So There are some very effective drugs that are working with people with MS. There are even some research now that show there are some drugs that actually can reverse some of the symptoms that are caused by MS, such as some of the demyelination, which is fascinating to me. It doesn't mean that those drugs work for everybody, but there has been some recent drug trials to show that even with progressive MS, that there has been some reversibility of demyelination with some of the latest drugs. And again, that's not a cure, but there is some hope out there. So I think the big thing to just keep in mind is that everyone is different, and you don't want to just assume that someone with MS can't exercise, because that's not true. But there are some people with MS that you want to be very cautious when working with them, especially if they are in an acute flare-up. That's not the time to push aerobics. That's not the time to stress their body. That's time to modify their activity or offer some interventions that are less going to be less taxing for them until they go into the remission and are out of that exacerbation stage. That's the time where some modification, such as an assisted device, could be useful, like using a cane versus no assisted device, or perhaps using a walker versus a cane due to safety concerns during that relapse. Or in some cases, that's when using a power mobility device is better than a four-wheeled walker. So there's quite a spectrum. I think the big thing, again, is not to assume what people need and approach MS as this kind of a negative health condition that's just going to catastrophically take away someone's activities of daily living and require them to have permanent modification. That's not true anymore, except in some more rare cases where someone has a real rapidly progressive MS that's not responding well to drug therapy.